What a beautiful song and so perfect for today's talk. Thank you, Chris. Now I have to watch that movie. Last week we started a series on the book See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love by Valerie Korr. And that book fits perfectly into this season for nonviolence that runs from January 30th to April 4th. Now, Kaur describes revolutionary love as an ethic that has anchored the nonviolent movements of reformers throughout history, involving the choice to enter into wonder and labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves in order to heal and transform the world around us. It's a way of life that's personal, rooted in joy, and is a force for justice. Now she divides her book into three parts, or what she calls steps. There's three parts of steps to becoming an agent of revolutionary love. And we become these agents to seek love and to fix a broken world. She says step one is learning to see no stranger, and that is learning how to love others with the compassion of Buddha, the heart of Jesus, the African Ubuntu awareness that teaches I am because you are, and the ancient Sanskrit wisdom of oneness, which we embrace in unity. We learn this practice when we wonder about people, grieve with them, and choose to fight with and for them to build the kind of solidarity that the world needs. Now, step two is learning to tend towards the wounds, and that's learning how to love even our opponents. And step three is learning how to breathe and push. That means how to pace ourselves and develop resilience for the long labor of love that transformation requires. And we'll be looking at those two steps later on. Last week, we began with part one, where we looked at the first element of loving, which is wonder. Wonder calls us to be open and curious about others. The Sikh saying, I see no stranger, is based on the teaching of their founder, Guru Nanak, that everyone around him was part of him that he just didn't know yet. Isn't that wonderful? Knowing that we're part of everything and everyone around us. We just don't know them yet. The author says wonder is our birthright. It's a way of being in the world that opens our hearts and minds and allows us to continue to discover and grow. And that includes gaining information and about how to understand, appreciate, and ultimately love ourselves and others unconditionally. Now, the failure to wonder is fear of the unknown. And that locks us into our stories, creates separation, and disables our capacity for empathy. And that's also the beginning of violence. So today we're going to look at the other two aspects of step one, learning to see no stranger, and that is to grieve with and to fight with and for others. As I explained last week, Valerie Korr is a Sikh activist, filmmaker, and civil rights lawyer. She grew up in California on her family's farm, and her life changed dramatically after September 11th while she was a junior at Stanford University. Originally planning to be a professor of religious studies and oral history, her life changed because anyone who looked like she did, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Arabs, South Asian Americans, all became targets for violence and persecution. That shift for her occurred on September 15th when, still at her parents' home, she received a call from a close friend in Phoenix telling her that a close family friend, who she called Uncle, had been killed by a lone gunman in a pickup truck while planting flowers in front of his gas station. He was an easy target. He was a Sikh and wore a turban. She was planning to go to India on a trip to write her thesis, which was to create an archive and oral history of Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims that survived two massacres, one in 1947 and the other in 1984. But the university canceled her trip because they said it was too dangerous. Now, she understood, but she also knew the importance of written history because what's documented is remembered. So she shifted her thesis from going to India and writing about what happened in 1947 and 1984 to what was happening right in front of her. She said, I don't know how to stop the hate and violence, but I know we need to document it for any kind of intervention to happen. So, armed with her camcorder, she wrote a new proposal, and she and her cousin spent months driving across America following the news of the hate crimes. At each stop, she and her cousin interviewed and videoed the victims, their families, and communities, catching the stories, as she says, like shards of a mirror, each reflecting a fragment of truth. She wrote, the beatings, shootings, and stabbings were mostly reported as isolated incidents in the local news, but the FBI reported a 1,600% increase in anti-Muslim hate, which is only a fraction of what actually occurred because so many of the incidents were not reported and were not classified as hate crimes. And it involved not only Muslims, but Christian Arabs, South Asian Hindus, Black Muslims, and even Native Americans who were ironically told to go back to their country. The most consistent and immediate targets for hate were Sikh Americans, the only people in the United States who wear turbans. And the wearing of turbans is an integral part of their faith, and it's viewed as an extension of their bodies. She documented these stories and says, I was learning how to witness emotions without getting overwhelmed by them. When I wanted to shut down, I tried again to wonder about the person in front of me and ask the next question. So not only was she doing the wonder part of that first step, she was witnessing and sharing in another person's grief. Her own understanding of the healing power of shared grieving is shown as she shares a story about her uncle, his life, his death, and the loss to the family, their friends, and their community. She and her family went to India to visit her aunt, who had traveled to Arizona for her husband's funeral and then went back home. After crying, hugging, and grieving together, she turned to her aunt and said, I have just one question. What would you like to tell the people of America? Her aunt dried her tears and said, I can never forget the love they showed me. I can never forget their love. They did as much as they could for me. They gave me so much love. I had no friends or community there, but everyone gathered together, Hindu, Muslim, Christian. Everyone was crying. So all she wanted to do was thank America for loving her. What she felt in the wake of a tragedy was the love that was extended to her by strangers. That love outweighed any sadness that was in her heart. Her uncle's story had gotten media coverage and introduced Sikhism to the community, and local interfaith networks of churches, mosques, and synagogues all showed up to pray and grieve with them. Just 1 week after his death, 3,000 people came to his memorial for prayers and tears and resolutions against hate. Kaur wrote, and this outpouring of love was enough to change his wife's experience of the loss. She bore the pain, but not alone. She shared it with people she had never met before, saying they didn't even know me, but they cried with me. That's how powerful love is. That's how powerful empathy and wonder and sharing grief with another person is. Her uncle's story had sparked the wonder in that American community and drew them close to his wife and the family and the Sikh community. Grieving with them was the first step to understanding them. And these are the first two aspects of step one: wonder and grieving with others. Nothing could bring back her husband, but communal grieving made it possible for her to breathe and to learn to live with her wound without having the pain create another reason to divide the world into us and them. Love was that unifying factor. And this is what we're called to do as agents of revolutionary love: to bear witness to and be willing to allow our hearts to open and share in another's pain, in a stranger's pain. And that's the true meaning and practice of compassion. Korr says, grieving together, bearing the unbearable, is an act of transformation. It brings survivors into the healing process, creates new relationships, and energizes its demand for justice. She goes on to say, I am talking about sitting with pain together, modeling how to do that in public view, reflecting quietly on our deepest values, and mourning the dead, all of the dead. Acknowledging our own pain, our own grief, is an essential part of being empathetic. She says, we don't have to be empathetic all the time. It's important to take part, to rejuvenate, to heal, to breathe in order to rejoin the cause. And that's a really important point. You know, each of us is responsible for our own self-care, and we can be empathetic, we can grieve with others, but we also have to take the time to renew, to regenerate, and to heal. We also need to be aware that soothing words are not enough, not when trauma has spanned centuries. But if we are to be present to the pain, if we sit together, heart-centered, and grieve together, we can begin to ask, how do we fight for one another? And that's the final part of step one. It's supporting and fighting for one another, not just those in our own circle, but for all. The Sikh founder Guru Nanak called for a revolution of the heart. He inspired people to practice equality, selfless service, and social justice. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus saw no stranger. He tended to the sick and homeless. He fought for the rights of each individual. He saw, lived, and embodied love and oneness. The author's writing from her religious background, which is Sikhism. But these are all what Jesus expressed. And these truths are universal. Guru Nanak called his followers Sikhs because it means students of truth. And these students of truth became known as warriors sworn to defend all people in harm's way. We in Unity call ourselves truth students. Truth is truth. It's universal, no matter what tradition or path you follow. And many Christians call themselves soldiers in the army of Christ. So warriors or soldiers, we're all being called to see no stranger, to only see oneness. Now, the Sikhs' religious dress represents 5 articles of faith. It's called the 5 Ks. It's a steel bracelet, a comb, an undergarment, a dagger, and long uncut hair. All of these were meant to make Sikhs visible so that they could never hide in a crowd or hide from the call to live from their faith, to live in love and in justice for all. Now, Kaur shared her grandfather's teaching that love is dangerous business. If you choose to see no stranger, then you must love people even when they don't love you. You must wonder about them even when they refuse to wonder about you. You must even protect them when they are even in harm's way. So by committing to nonviolence, Carr chose to fight nonviolently by becoming a human rights lawyer and activist. Reflecting on her journey, she wrote, "Any act to change the world around us begins within us. It starts with a sense of agency, a sense that we have the power to create change." And that's why I read from Keep a True Lent, the power, about the power we have. The power of thought is our power to create. And as she says, it starts within us. She says, when we feel helpless in the face of injustice, it's easy to give in to the idea that this is just the way things are because it's the way things have been. But then something happens and we're moved. We begin to see that the norms and institutions that order this world are not inevitable, but constructed, and therefore they can be changed. Each of us has the power to combat hate. The Brazilian educator Paulo Freire calls it critical consciousness. And it's like waking up because it's that internal shift in awareness, the realization of personal power, and knowing that we can tap into it to change the world around us. So, what does it look like? And what does it mean to be a warrior sage in our times? Well, what is it that breaks your heart? What is it within you that causes you to want to take action and bring about change? Is it racism, anti-Semitism, injustice towards the LGBT community, the homeless, the disenfranchised? What stirs you to take action? What is in front of you that you can no longer live with? Hold that in mind, and Core invites us to answer 4 questions. What can we use to fight on behalf of others? Our pen, our voice, our art, our pocketbook, our presence? Begin where you are, in your home, in your community, on the front lines, or behind the scenes. The second question is, what can we use to protect ourselves and others when the fight is dangerous? Our safety and the safety of all is what matters. So we do what we can to protect one another. The third is, what is our instrument? What centers us? What brings joy, peace, breath, and healing? Is it singing, dancing, drumming, praying, practicing yoga? Be that, do that, and offer that. And then the fourth is, she says, finally, who is our sacred community? She says, we need 3 kinds of people: someone who sees the best in us, someone who's willing to fight for our side, and someone who can fight for us when we need help. Bring them together, and we've created a pocket of revolutionary love. This is how we choose to love and engage in the long labor for a new life and a new world. We wonder about the stranger. We grieve with the stranger. We engage in the struggle for the rights of that stranger. This is the first step in seeing no stranger. And now I invite you to close your eyes as we move into meditation. Just allow yourselves to breathe in and breathe out as you become comfortable in your seat. Just remove anything that may be on your lap. Feel yourself relaxing all your muscles. Feel your shoulders relaxing as you just let go. And you just breathe. I release my insecurity and I receive divine love. And filled with the Holy Spirit, I release my unhappiness and I receive the joy of oneness. I release anxiety and I receive the peace of God. I release my indifference and I receive kindness. I release severity and I receive gentleness. I release fear and I live the love that I am. I allow myself to be in the world with a sense of wonder and amazement. And I behold the divine in every person, in all situations, and in every moment. I am filled with wonder and amazement, and I am in awe of the beauty of all of God's creations, those that look like me and those that do not, those that believe as I do and those that believe differently. I know that there is only one of which we are all part of, and I see no stranger, only part of myself, blessed with the ability to love. I see no stranger, only a reflection of God expressed in the world through the individuality of each human being. I see no stranger. I see the embodiment of love, the same as me. And now I allow myself to move deeper and deeper into the silence, and I just listen. We're so grateful for the awareness of the presence of Christ within us. And now we bring to mind anyone who may be in need of prayer. Those on the Unity prayer list, those on Silent Unity, and all of mankind, humankind. We affirm the power and presence within them that will see them through any difficulty they're experiencing. And we affirm their faith in the power and the presence of God within them. And we know that with God, all things are possible. So I invite you now to bring your awareness back into the room where you are, back in your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Welcome back. And this is the portion of our service where we have the opportunity to give.